Hey, welcome to the pre-roll for ELL 179. All the show notes, by the way, for today at lionsofliberty.com/ELL 179. You know what? Let's just plug some Patreon today. If you like what we're doing here, having meaningful conversations, insightful conversations, and honest conversations, you can support us. Go to patreon.com/Lions of Liberty. But there's oh so much more when you join. You can listen to JB, my guest today, talking about conspiracies and truly taking on the mantle of Dr. Science, as he's the one that pokes logic holes in these conspiracy theories. He's the guy that brings people down to earth, but in a good way, in a measured way, in a hilarious way. There's also Degenerate Gamblers, the hilarious show that Rico, Odie, and I host, talking trash, telling stories, gambling on things, at least when gambling was a topic. And of course, Rick and Morty recaps, South Park recaps, I don't know, a bunch of crap. Just go to patreon.com/Lions of Liberty, would you?
Welcome to Electric Libertyland, here on the Lions of Liberty podcast, your weekly shot of culture, comedy, and liberty with your host, Brian McWilliams.
Hey, welcome to Electric Libertyland, episode number 179. I do have a special guest this episode, JB Lubin, Dr. Science, one of our Lions of Liberty. I figured, as you'll hear, better to have another perspective and a very pertinent perspective on this. But before we get into the interview, guys, I just want to tell you, it's a tough time right now. It's hard to express your feelings. It's hard to come out and be honest. It's hard to know exactly where to stand because it seems like unless you're with the exact narrative people want, then you are ripe for attack. And I feel like this interview today really did a great job of cutting through that kind of the BS. And I've cut out the cursing in this episode. Those in our Lions Pride can get the curses, but I wanted to be able to make it very easily shareable. I think it's an important episode to share, so please do. And here we go. All right. As mentioned, I'm joined by our resident Philadelphia Lion, who is still alive. Thank God you made it through the fires and the fighting. JB Lubin, welcome back to Electric Libertyland, man.
Oh, thank you. It feels like it's been ages, but, you know.
I know. The last time was probably like the Christmas episode, right?
Yeah, probably, you know. But it's just like putting on an old glove, you know. Feels good.
That's exactly what I call my wife. call her the old glove. Yeah, I know. The Christmas episode was something special. The worst Christmas caroling I've ever heard in my entire life.
I'm telling you, if you want quality, we should practice at least once. I'm not saying make a whole like month-long thing about it, but one run through beforehand would probably help.
We need to have an ongoing Lions choir, I think would be the ideal thing. You know, like that should be our next pride level is if you join at like 300 and above, you get to tune in. We'll have the Lions choir. We'll get, once my daughter's early enough, we'll get Odie's daughter in, my daughter, we'll get Rico's son in. If you and your wife have a child, it's going to be beautiful. It's going to replace like that. What's that special choir that they have that's so famous, the kids choir?
Yeah.
They sang in Home Alone. That's all I can remember. They were like in Home Alone.
Some tabernacle? Is it the Mormons?
Maybe it is the
Mormon tabernacle?
Yeah.
Am I making that up?
The Mormon tabs?
Yeah, maybe. Something like that.
They drop with acid?
Definitely tabernacles in there. It's not often you use that word, so it sticks in your head.
Yeah, definitely. So, this isn't, by the way, this wasn't a formally announced LALDL, but considering the fact that we're both alcoholics, sitting down and talking about deep issues addressing society, we might as well be getting a little bit drunk during it, right? So what do you got in your hand over there?
I've got the scotch I've been sipping on the last few weeks. It's a Campbelltown. It's Glen Scotia, it's called.
Glen Scotia. Is that like the Scotsmans had sex with the Nova Scotians and made a beautiful brew?
Maybe. It's pretty peaty, so it sounds like that mating, I would say.
Yeah, it makes a lot of sense.
Tastes like the sea, I'll say.
Yeah. I also am doing a scotch. I'm doing Dewar's 15, a buddy gave me. It's actually shockingly good, the Dewar's 15. I didn't realize. Yeah, because I'm not a huge Dewar's guy, but this is actually really good.
Dewar's is a solid fallback, you know?
Yeah. Oh, excuse me.
But I'm a snob. I only drink single malts, so.
Well, some of us have to be fancy and pinky out, and I know that's you all the way. But yeah, so for those of you who aren't familiar with JB overly, he's on. So of course, JB's one of our Lions of Liberty, and he's on a lot of our Pride shows. So you always take part in the Conspiracy Corners, of course, as our resident Dr. Science, and a lot of our Roundup shows. But yeah, so this episode, I wanted to. I mean, you know me, I'm a white guy that yells in a microphone, and I thought that for the second week of covering George Floyd, everything that's going on in America right now, it would make a lot more sense for me to have you in rather than just be myself yammering on, because obviously the big difference between you and me is that you're French.
Yeah, I think that will definitely contribute to this conversation greatly.
No, JB is black. Let's throw that out there right now. But yeah, man. So I mean, we've had discussions, the Lions in general, about race relations, about policy, about policing, and all this other stuff. But things have come to such a head. And, I kind of want to talk about what led into this. I think the COVID lockdowns played a role. But I just want to hear what's your perspective looking at this, before we get into the different news items. Just tell me your perspective on this. And obviously, I can't grasp it like, from your perspective. I'm a white dude. I'm not dealing with certain shit. So, tell me a little bit about your experience, your perspective on what you deal with, what you've seen. Do you agree wholeheartedly that we are still living in a racist America? Lay it on me, man.
Well, wow.
I know it's a lot. It has the more scotch. It has the more scotch.
Where do I begin with that intro?
Yeah, I know, man.
Can't toss me a softball to just ease us into the conversation or anything, but okay.
I did. What do you think all the conversation about drinking was about?
Let's dive. I thought that's just how we start everything. Let's dive right in then. So maybe we'll take this one at a time.
Yeah.
God, like first thing I would say is that I'm not surprised that this is happening. I don't know if you are or what the general consensus is. Like, as this is going on, everything that's been going on, not just since the COVID lockdown, but for like the last 5, probably 10 years, it seems like this is something that's been building up. I'm 36. I'm going to expose my age out there. I'm not shy. And the last 10 years of being 36, these flare-ups with these police, these interactions with the police that have been caught media attention, have gone viral. Probably, as I use the word viral, due to the fact of this expansion of everyone having phones and everyone using social media and being able to spread things that happen in isolated places, something that can happen in South Bend, Indiana, and be seen in China in a matter of hours. Mm-hmm. And this is all kind of unfolded in the last 10, 15 years that this is even possible for human beings to do. And with this expansion of information sharing, we're starting to see a lot of ugly things. And when I started going through this like speech/rant, going a different avenue, but then I kind of pieced it together in my head. The technology is what's driving this. Mm-hmm. The change in technology, the way that we share information, pictures, the ability to take pictures, the ability to share information so quickly is really what's driving something that's been underlying, has been ever present since this country's been founded. Yeah. It's not so much, I love when people say things are getting worse. Things aren't getting worse. Things are getting better. Things are getting objectively better. We could do a whole separate show where I can pull up stats and statistics about even race relations and how people interact. Things are getting better, but we're just seeing the bad shit more. Mm-hmm. The bad shit that's always existed. The bad shit that's not going to magically go away because Barack Obama was president for 8 years. This is what we're seeing. And as the more we're able to see it and the more we're able to share it, it's just like building this cauldron of animosity. Yeah. And just aggravation and frustration that, coupled with being under house arrest for the last 3 months, I can't this is powder keg seems it doesn't even describe the cliche of what's going on.
It's an absolutely perfect storm. And I had posted in our forum group too, to saying cell phones, the advantage of everybody having video on cell phones right now is it's the greatest thing that's happened for police accountability. It's the greatest thing that's happened for exposing this for sure. But like you said, it also has because of social media, these things get amplified so much. And while you said, I agree completely that things are definitively getting better, and it's like you would never know it by looking at the news and what's reported. You never know it. And I actually think that oftentimes the attention to this and like how much people focus on all these different racial issues are creating more uncomfortableness and awkwardness between people where they wouldn't have thought about it before. It's like now it's all this concentration on how we're different, identity politics, and it's like people are uncomfortable around each other, not because they're racist as much, but I want to get into how I think these protests are creating more racism, not less. But I think that they're concentrating on like the amount of mental energy putting into how to deal with other people on the basis of race just in everyday casual interactions is also adding to this like stress level where it builds and builds and builds. People are at home, like you said, they're not working, they're not making money, and especially too, the COVID lockdowns affected people of color massively more than anybody else. Like the people that were laid off from most of these jobs were people that were of color. So it's like you've got people that are angry, and yet it's like they don't understand what's going on exactly with the government and how the government, I think, is driving a lot of this overall. But that we can save for later on. So I don't want to distract you too much from our initial conversation.
There's a lot what you said that I agree with, but there's a few things that I kind of push back against. One of those things
please, man. This is what
idea of like people talking about race and race relations and that making people uncomfortable. I think that's just necessary. Even let's even call it a necessary evil. Mm-hmm. Part of being that feeling of being uncomfortable is a part of growth to me. If it makes you uncomfortable, that means that there's certain things about that you need to think about and think about within yourself.
Well, let me clarify. It's not. I have no uncomfortableness at all talking about race relations personally. What I'm referring to is, and I'll try to put this so that it's very clear what I'm saying. It's more that people, because it's so front and center at all times, like, for example, and I've said this a couple other times, if I'm walking down the street, like, let's say I'm walking down, there's a black guy coming down the street at me. I think so much more now about how I have to act in order to make that guy feel comfortable, and that it's like, what do I have to do to make sure he knows that I'm not racist? And I never thought about that shit ever in my life before. And now it's like front and center where I'm like, I want to make sure that this guy knows I don't have any animosity. I want him to feel comfortable. Whereas before all the last 10 years, I just didn't think about it. I was like, what's up? And I'd walk right by. And now it's like a thing in my mind. And I think a lot of people have that same thing. And that thing gets picked up as uncomfortableness with a race rather than uncomfortableness with like, am I going to come across a certain way? Am I going to set up this guy's race star? Well,
there's a lot that I can see that, and I can definitely sympathize with that. A lot of times when I talk about this with white people,
how dare you?
Yeah, particularly white men. I tell them I can understand in a certain way because I deal with a similar circumstance. I might be black, but I'm also a man. So the way that I interact with feminism is the way a white person basically interacts with racism, right? And the way that is projected in media and the types of things. And sometimes I see certain things said about sexism in society that I don't necessarily agree with, but I don't allow that to change the way that I feel about myself in my interactions with women. I might do something at the workplace to a female employee that I might not realize, which is the fear that you're talking about. This is walking on eggshells type of thing that you're trying to describe. It's going to happen. The thing that makes me comfortable, this is the transition from, I guess, the sexism aspect is I don't consider myself to be a sexist. I also don't consider myself to be perfect. I'm doing the best that I can. And if I do something that a woman at my job perceives to be a little off bounds, even if I don't think so, it's the time to have a conversation. I'll apologize and say, I don't really understand what I did, and we can talk about it, but I don't allow it to change my regular behavior because as far as I'm concerned, and you've known me for years, my regular behavior isn't overtly sexist. But I do.
No, you hide it very well.
Yeah.
You hide it great.
But being a male on the face of the earth, I'm imbibed with sexism from birth as part of our culture. So there's no way I can say I'm free of sexism because I'm unalive. I'm a man who lives on Earth. Yeah. It's the same way with racism. Doesn't make you a fucking racist. Same way I don't think I'm a sexism, knowing that there's certain sexist elements that is just absorbed in my being because I'm alive on this planet.
No, I think that's a great point. And I was thinking about that recently too, is like, I don't consider myself a racist, but without a doubt, I think number one, white privilege is a thing. I don't know if it's as pronounced as, Black Lives Matter and some activists would make you think, but it's definitely a thing. And I definitely think that, people do look at white people and black people differently, whether that's just based upon basic minority status or self-identification, people kind of self-identify with groups. Yeah. So, but at the same time, like I'm not racist, but I think that it definitively, like you're saying, we're all going to naturally have some sort of, whether it's cognizant or subconscious racial biases or some sort of identity, kind of like I said, like the identity issue where just seeing somebody that doesn't look like you, I think on a base level does jar you. And you have to get past that when, it's like you shouldn't judge people on that surface. But I think people are naturally, inclined and designed to kind of be like, okay, this person's like me. That makes me feel more at ease, like from a fundamental nature level. And I think that's something that is going to lead to weird interactions, no matter what. No matter how much work's done, it's going to be strange to no matter what you do. And I also think that people need to acknowledge that not everything it has racial intent. That's I think the thing about racism is like the level of intent I think varies. Where there's people that are certainly racist, but then there's people that are not racist. And I'm not using Karen in New York City Central Park. She's definitely in racial profiling, calling the cops on the guy with the dog. But I think certain other people, they might do things by accident that they're not really thinking about or come across and say something the wrong way where it's now interpreted as racist, where they are not a racist, quote unquote,
Yeah, I believe that. And that's fine. And I believe it or not, most black people acknowledge that, like no one is expecting people to be perfect, when I talk to my family and other black people and go on the media and stuff, it's not a matter of these like missteps and stuff that's really the problem. It's not acknowledging there's a problem at all.
Yeah.
If that's the problem, it's not saying you have to be a perfect human being. Saying that there's not a problem is the problem. So
I think that addressing that point, I've seen some prominent like black libertarians on Twitter with big followings tweeting out stats which are accurate, right? And it's about the death rates. So policing death rates, people shot, because typically when you do have something like this, a black man killed by the police, it blows up. We get the protests, we get the riots, and people throw out these stats, which are like white people are killed more often than black people.
Is this per capita?
This is per capita or per year. Oh no, per year.
Because that's very important.
Well, I think it's per year.
Because there's way more white people than black people. If it's not per capita, then it's
it's way more white people than black people per year, and it's something like the one I saw was something like 16 to 6 or something. But the thing that while that stat might be accurate, the thing that, to your point and to what we're talking about, that is without a doubt inarguable and doesn't get conveyed in the stats is over criminalization, over policing of black neighborhoods. Like you said, we do talk about racial profiling, different treatment of black people versus white people or other minority groups. And this is something that's not going to show up in the stat sheet, because you can't account for a cop car driving around your neighborhood 20 times until they pull you over. Like there was a buddy of mine, actually from freshman year at Penn State, a guy named Alvin, and Alvin posted, and I don't know if this is accurate or not, but he posted on Facebook, he's saying he's been pulled over, 400 plus times, and he lists all these things that happened to him. I don't know if they're accurate. I would believe it though. And he is, a sweet, nice guy, well-educated, same education being you, unimposing guy, but yet he's clearly been harassed. And I kind of like, in a way, I want to say, look, what you're protesting specifically about police killing black people is wrong. I don't want to support that message so much as expose people and get them to wake up to the level of state-sponsored racism that goes on by virtue of the police state.
I couldn't agree more. It's these initial interactions in the first place that build this powder keg that make, and this term has been floating around forever, the police and occupying force. Mm. if the police, and I always feel like I'm beating a dead horse here when I say these things, when
not a dead police horse, because that's a felony.
Yeah, with this drug war, this interaction has become war.
Mm-hmm.
Now you have two rival camps. Police are afraid, and it is fear. It's not, and maybe not in the case of George here.
Yeah. Because
I watched that video, and that dude looked like a sociopath. It was just like nothing going on while he was doing this. It was just like having his morning coffee.
Yeah, like the cries of anguish, that whatever the crowd was saying, they could mean nothing to him.
But other than that, this idea of the trigger happy cop in the hood mentality is because of this drug war and this inability to remove the main source of crime and removing the most productive individuals, young males out of an entire demographic, out of an entire neighborhood, being shuffled and moved around and abused and put into prison and basically being disenfranchised once they get out. All their opportunities decrease drastically. Yeah. If people say if you're born black, you start at -100. Once you get out of jail when you're 25, you're like -1,000.
Oh God,
you're fucked.
Especially with a felony. If you have a felony on your record, yeah, good luck getting a job. Good luck getting anything. What are you going to do? Crime, drugs.
There's a reason why every person who's ever done that, like we have a whole segment of our show about that, gets its own podcast. It's not because it's normal. It's because it's rare. It's incredibly difficult. It's an extraordinary thing to do. That's why we devote whole podcasts to it, because it's not the norm.
Yeah, exactly.
We're not even talking 9 out of 10 failure rate here. It's probably 99 out of 100 or something like that. So it's like,
well, I think also, man, it's like it also comes together. You know, we talk about the militarization of the police, but it's not just about the funding and the weapons going into the police too. I think it's also that the police in general, and we're getting a little bit off topic here, but we'll return to George Floyd in a second. So I want to talk about the official coroner report versus the coroner report that his family had done. But you also look at just the way, like who's becoming cops. And a lot of it also ties in, in an overarching sense, getting way off topic tangent-wise, but in an overarching sense, you look at the war state, right, the ongoing military state, you have all these soldiers rotating out of service that are coming home. They don't necessarily have skills. Not everybody's using the GI Bill and going to college. Not everybody's are going to the Army after college like Howie. But they come back and they are soldiers. They have a soldier mentality, and they have an us versus them mentality that is prevalent with the police now. And we're looking at that in the response here. I'm going to tie it back right now. See, we're looking at that in the response to protests, right? And in response, like, for every looter, which we'll talk about in a second, and rioter, there are peaceful protesters that are getting rubber bulleted in the face, that are getting tear gas in the face, that are getting beaten, that are getting kicked over in the streets. I mean, you've seen the videos of these people and how the tactics roll out. And these cops, it's not like your local sheriff. They are soldiers that have come home that have the mentality of soldiers, and they view you as the enemy. And of course, the fear comes into that, but their training comes into it. This brutal, I am kill or be killed training.
It could be really bad, but I don't know. Like, did you see the Atlanta video?
I've seen like 25 different brutal videos lately, so I'm not sure.
Yeah, they're all melting to one at this point.
This is the true melting pot of police brutality.
Yeah, we finally made it. I don't know, like maybe that's the case, but I feel I say this very tentatively, but I feel like I've read something that former military actually make better police officers. Yeah, because they're more in tune. Like they're more in tune to like those stressful situations. When you've been at Afghanistan, Baltimore, it's not that much.
That's true. I guess you're not going to panic as much. That's
I feel like I've read something. Like, don't quote me on that because it was a long time ago. But I feel like that's and it kind of makes intuitive sense to me. But if I can find it, I can share it. But I think I've read something that military experience actually makes you more even.
I read it on army.com.
Probably, while they were trying to recruit me. But nevertheless, exactly. You do have a point. And it all stems to this like combative, like it's a war out there, and that's how they treat it.
Yeah.
Yeah. I was just listening to some people discuss this, and they say in a lot of police departments, they have a whole section for academy recruits where they just have them watch routine traffic stops turn into murders where the person has a gun and they shoot the police officer while they're cadets. They're having them sit in classrooms watching this shit on loop and send them out there. Go have fun, kids.
It's like it's like that 80s cliche in like college movies where it's like the professor's like, look to your left and to your right. One of the two of you will fail, except they're like, one of the two of you will be shot in the face by a motorist and you won't see it coming. So you shoot first. You be Han Solo.
So I'm like, yeah, it's like, so maybe we should de-escalate the situation and lessen the interactions between police and civilians that are hostile.
Yeah. Well, and I think also, too, that comes to a head when we look at, so, we saw the Armory, I'm probably saying that wrong, Arbory. Yeah, we saw that where it's like, these two hillbillies shot this guy that was in a neighborhood. But at the same time, there's also the video or the story I talked about, Breonna Taylor, right? Where we have the vests, they have the cameras, we don't see them. We have cops constantly having these, like they put all these different surveillance system and measures and checks and balances into place, but then they also put protections in place for the cops. And like, I don't know if you saw, but Justin Amash had introduced a bill. And this is, I think, really, if there's one thing, well, not one thing. If there's something really good that can come of this tangibly, I think in the near term, it would be the Justin Amash bill, which removes that shield that police have. And I forget the name of it every time, and I'm forgetting it right now. But it removes
immunity
qualified immunity. Yes,
qualified immunity. Yeah,
it removes qualified immunity from these cops because they wear not only the shield on their chest, but they've got this shield that protects them from getting prosecuted. So they don't fear using that irrational force. They don't have to think twice if they make a mistake because they know that they're going to get a pension. They're going to be able to go and be protected by powerful police unions. And of course, all the politicians that benefit from those union donations. So, I mean, what's your thought on that? And then tie in, because I want to jump also to the ways in which these cops are protected too, the coroner's report on George Floyd.
That was so. What do we want? What are we going to go first with the immunity?
Yeah, go with the immunity. Let's talk about this goddamn coroner report, which was unbelievable.
I think it's a fantastic idea. I read the letter that Justin Amash crafted, and seeing that this was initially something like it was written by our federal government that law enforcement would be allowed to be sued for damages, and it was as. From his words, gutted in the 60s, right? It was a 1967 act. I was trying to pull it up to see if
I wonder what was going on in the 60s.
Yeah.
What was going down right in the 60s, JB?
Yeah,
did they pull that back? Weird.
What a coincidence.
What a coincidence of time. Which, by the way, that's a powerful point that I think all of the protests, well, not all of them, we're making it right now. That's a powerful thing to point out. That in the 60s, during the height of what's going on, big racial, well, not the height, I guess the Civil War is probably the height, but in the modern time, difference in, racial equality in bringing black people up and giving them a voice and merging people and allowing interracial marriages, allowing interracial schooling, you have them change the law to give police immunity. That is something that more people need to think about.
Yeah. And I'm glad that you see, this is the thing. Like,
are you real time reading? Because I sent you we were talking about before the show. I sent them 50 links. I'm like, here's what we're going to be talking about in alphabetical order.
I was just trying to confirm the date. Yeah, 1967. It says starting in 1967, the Supreme Court began gutting the law by inventing the doctrine of qualified immunity. And it's like, what a coincidence! 1967. Who would have thought?
Yeah, weird.
But yeah, this is definitely a step in the right direction to bring the police state, rein in the police state as certain. If they're at least financially liable and police misconduct now becomes a burden of the state because now they're paying out millions and millions of dollars for these transgressions, then maybe we'll start seeing some change because now there's a hole in the purse. Yeah. So I think this is a fantastic idea.
Well, my worry about
what your thoughts on it.
Well, I actually didn't realize, because I didn't read Justin Amash's whole letter until you just said it. I didn't realize that it was gutted and it had been different. I mean, this is mind-blowing.
It was the Civil Rights Act of 1871. Congress allowed individuals to sue state and local officials, including police officers who violate their rights.
It's unbelievable that this hasn't been pointed out before now and brought to the forefront, to be honest. And I think good job, Justin Amash. Happy you did not run for Libertarian presidential candidate so you can keep doing work like this. Much better idea. But, it's like, that's shocking. And then, we look about, we're like talking about this coroner report and removing qualified immunity. There's so many things in place to protect these people. And like you said, the problem is, though, if people can sue the police, and this is one more endorsement of privatization of the police, because then you can sue the police, that police company goes bankrupt, and you bring another one in. It's not the state, it's not the taxpayers, it's not the people footing the bill, because all they're going to do is raise taxes. And that's where, like, even with the looters, or not the looters, even with the rioters who are setting on fire, setting cop cars on fire, right, and destroying them, who's paying for that? You know who is? We're paying for it. We're going to pay for it.
Well, that's true. There is a breaking point. There is still going to be pressure. They can't. I imagine the powers that be won't assume raising taxes can eat all the costs. They're going to try to clamp down. If something like this happens, there's going to be extra pressure to avoid these types of lawsuits. It's guaranteed.
Here's what they'll do is, remember all those civil asset forfeiture laws that they put on the books?
Yeah.
They're just going to be like, more of those, raise parking tickets. So I don't know. There's ways to fill that hole in the purse. But coming back to George Floyd, we saw the coroner's report, and the latest one I saw, like the first one I saw, was saying something like he did not die of any sort of asphyxiation or pressure on his neck or spine. And then the latest one I saw said that he was high on fentanyl and died of a heart attack, right? This is the official coroner's report from the city that's working with the cops. And then you see the family, which thank God they did this. The family gets their own autopsy done. And the guy's like, oh yeah, he died of, asphyxiation. He couldn't breathe. He was suffocated from a cop putting his fucking knee on his spine and his neck.
And you sent, I think the article you sent said it's been confirmed, the homicide has been confirmed by a second group of MEs, right? So that was two outside autopsies that confirm a homicide by asphyxiation. So
exactly. And I had Sandy told me, my wife told me today, that they're actually looking in with a civil rights, like a formal civil rights inquiry into the Minnesota Police Department, which is good. And from what I've heard from people that are in Minnesota, well deserved. But I mean, let me change topics for a minute, because one of the things I really wanted to get to with these riots and protests, or riots versus protests versus looters, I'll say, is I got in a big fight on Facebook with a black comedian that I know, who came at me because I posted, I said, if you're a looter, kill yourself, right? And I said,
I saw it. I read the thread. I read that thread in particular pretty much all the way through.
Thank you for your help.
No, I'm always a passive observer. I don't know if you've noticed. It's the scientist in me. I don't interact. I just take notes.
JB just puts the maze down and then tases people in the
exactly. That's what I do. Yeah,
I'm just here taking notes. Show for. Yeah, I brought you on to electrify me for turning. I mean, legitimately, though. Actually, that is why you're here, just to electrify me if I go down the wrong path, JB. So you saw the thread, but it was back and forth. And basically, the point I wanted to make, though, and maybe I should have spelled this out and not just had a very wide encompassing, if you're looting, kill yourself. But the way I look at this, right, you've got legitimate protests. And you've got riots, which, protests sometimes can turn to riots. People are angry. As you said, people want to push back, right, and setting these cars on fire, these police cars, and setting precincts on fire. That is, I think falls under civil disobedience, right? You're fighting back against the state. Where it crosses the line for me, of course, is when you get into burning businesses and private ownership of these businesses and people's incomes and livelihoods and that sort of thing. And I made this point to him, and I made this point to other people, and I would presume you agree, but you might not, is that I feel like this entire thing, once it turns into violence, once it turns into destruction, and even I believe Martin Luther King said the same thing, is that when you have a protest turn into a riot or it turns into looting, then you have the general population, which is probably behind you, right? We're in 2020. The vast majority of America is behind racial equality, at least publicly. And when you have things turn violent, while they may publicly say, yes, it's justified for the greater good, privately what these people are saying, and the associations are making in their minds, is I see black people on TV breaking shit and looting businesses and burning stuff. Not all black people, but they're seeing black people, and this is a black protest or centric as of the impetus. They're looking at massive destruction. They're looking around their own communities, and in the back of their heads, instead of saying, We need to stop the police state. We need to rein in government control of what's going on. We need to focus on the main issues. Now you're going to have that rebound effect of, now I see these black people doing this, I'm more racist than I was before. Now we have more police calls for police presence than before. Now we have, I saw a poll today, 71% of people supporting bringing in the National Guard to walk around our neighborhoods with machine guns. So what do you think of my take on that? Is this going to be, is it worse off? Is the rebound going to be worse off for this?
It's multi-layered here.
That's my nickname, man.
First and foremost, I don't concern myself when situations like this happen, when there's like a real uprising, and this is an uprising against the police state. This is what you're seeing here.
I hope you're right, man. I hope you're right, and I hope it's not just a bunch of white college kids that are virtue signaling. Honestly.
Hopefully, but at least for the last 3 days, this is at least what the protesters are about. This is what we're seeing here. I don't give the looters and the rioters much thought. I don't give them airtime. I don't think about them. They're opportunists.
Yeah, and
they're not involved with this movement. They're not involved with this idea. They're not involved with this thought. They're seeing a situation of civil disruption or civil unrest and taking advantage of it. It's opportunism from the looters' part, and it's also opportunism on the powers that be, the people who don't want to see change. Take that and hold on to that on the looters to ignore all the peaceful protesters and the point of why this looting and the fires began in the first place. The minute that someone crosses that line, and it's almost inevitable when you have this level of civil unrest. A lot of libertarians like to talk a big game about, the boogaloo and what happens. But when shit starts going down, it's going to get very ugly. Oh, yeah. I hope everyone realizes that, right? Yeah. This is an unfortunate consequence of civil unrest. And to focus on the looting and the rioting and give that all the time in the airplay takes away from the fact of what caused this in the first place.
Well, exactly.
This is a backlash against the police state. And opportunists, and I'll say frankly racists, take this as an opportunity to look at what's a real inherent problem that people are peacefully protesting about and devalue it.
Right. But that's what I'm saying, though, is that's my problem with, the guy I was arguing with. He was defending looting. Right, he was basically saying, "Well,
that's out of bounds. I don't defend looting.
I know you don't, because you're a rational.
I don't defend the taking of someone's private property.
You're a rational thinking human being. Yeah. But we're seeing, I follow the Hotep crew on Twitter, and I actually agree with a lot of what they have to say. But Hotep Jesus is out there today, and he's defending looting Nike stores, and this comedian was defending looting, and it's like, to me, it just is the epitome of counterproductive. And like you're saying, the people use that. It's like these people don't think to the next level of if I allow it. And granted, the rioters and the protesters are not the same as the looters. They are opportunists. A lot of the looters are literally mafia, they're gangs, or they're straight up opportunist criminals who are following in. And what's been happening is they're following behind the protest and breaking shit. And I saw some amazing stuff. Like I saw you the link in Philadelphia, your hometown, where honestly, I thought it was very moving. And I was like, it was a brave guy. Being brave is not going out with 100,000 other people and carrying a placard. That's good, right? Great, fine. You support the cause. That's not brave. What's brave was these and this one guy, he was Hulk big, so he's not scared of much. I don't know if you saw the one guy with it was a black dude with kind of longish hair, but he was jacked. No with that guy. But he's they blocked this Target. They're don't loot Target. We live here. This is our neighborhood. This is not what we're about. And this is going to make everybody look bad. It makes the movement look bad. And he's exactly right. That's bravery. Standing up and saying, this is what we stand for, and we're not going to allow you to subvert it. We're not going to allow you to take advantage of it. We're not going to allow you to benefit off of it for your own personal gain. And I just don't think we're seeing enough of that. And instead, like I said, what we're seeing is coverage of looting because that's the thing that people are going to see the next day. They're not going to see.
That's what serves the agenda on a lot of bounds. They've already apprehended one Minnesota cop who was breaking some AutoZone windows. Turning this into a criminal activity instead of a an uprising against a police state is exactly what the powers that be that wants. Yeah. Let me tell you a story. Do you know the first riot I have a clear memory of in my life?
I don't know.
36.
Maybe it was mine because mine was the LA riots with Rodney King. That's my real.
It's not 92, right? The LA riots.
92 is not. No. Yeah, it was Rodney. It was also the last time that the National Guard was deployed.
Yeah. My first clear memory of a riot was the 1994 Vancouver Stanley Cup final riot. Do you remember this? I'm from Long Island, so there's a lot of Rangers fans. The Vancouver Canucks. Canucks
I do.
Played the New York Rangers in the Stanley Cup Finals in 1994. I remember this clearly. This was when I was becoming a hockey fan and a Devils fan in particular because I was an Islanders fan, and I hated the Rangers because of that. And I cheered for every team that played the Rangers to beat them. And the Devils played them in the Eastern Conference Finals in that year and lost in Game 7. And I became a Martin Brodeur fan because I like to play goalie in street hockey. And that's why I'm a Devils fan, even though I'm from New York, in case anyone gave a shit.
Well, I'm a Flyers fan from Philly, and the Devils suck, and the Rangers suck, and the Islanders suck. So there you go.
But nevertheless, the Canucks lost in Game 7 to the New York Rangers in 94 and tore their city apart.
Yeah.
Broke their windows, Main Street, destroyed fires, turning cars on fire. I was shocked. This was a fucking hockey game.
Yeah.
I could not believe what I was seeing as an 11-year-old. I was still 10 at that point. 10 years old in 5th grade, watching these hockey fans tear their city apart because their team lost.
Mm-hmm.
But you know what I didn't do after I saw that riot? Think that all white people were animals because the vast majority of people in Vancouver who are hockey fans are white.
Yeah.
I didn't think there were animals. I didn't think hockey was bad. I didn't stop watching hockey because it foments riots.
But you're not an idiot.
I don't.
But you're not a idiot. And you're not the guy that you're not a number one, you're not a fucking idiot. And number two, some people are just more predisposed to gut reactions. Like, look, I will point you to the election of Donald Trump, which I knew was going to happen. I told people it was going to happen because people in the back of their heads, like immigration was the issue at the time and American economy, right? White jobs lost. That was what Trump ran on. That's what he won on. And I said, people are going to talk a big game. They're going to say that he's bad. They're going to say he's wrong. They're going to say he's racist. And then they're going to vote for him because in the back of their heads, they're thinking, you know what, he's right. And I fear the same thing. I fear that people, fear-based, right, are going to, in the back of their heads, go, this thing blew up real fast. I'm terrified. I want more cops. I don't agree with the Black Lives Matter movement. And now it's tainted in their minds because it's tying together black violence and militarism and bringing in the National Guard. And that's what people are going to remember. And I maybe I'm wrong. I hope I'm wrong. You're not really what I'm worried about.
You're probably not wrong. And the only thing I could say to that is just be better. Just like I can acknowledge, that's why I told that story. Just like I can, you can separate this extraneous violence and absurdity from the real problem. I didn't stop becoming a hockey fan because some people were idiots. People are taking advantage of a serious situation. And that's all that it is. If you let this cloud your mind and cloud your opinion and make bad choices, I can't help you. Yeah. All I can say is be better. I can't stop this. This is an unfortunate consequence of civil unrest. Well, this is what I'm saying.
Here's a fascinating question for you. Antifa, we already know, is made up of 99% white kids. Antifa's been blamed for really kicking up the rioting, right? And also, we're seeing piles of bricks around these cities.
I've been hearing these rumors,
dude. There's pictures everywhere.
Yeah.
It's crazy.
I've been trying to track them down. I can only find 2 instances. They've had excuses for them. This is all conjecture. The one that was a pile of bricks in the middle of an intersection, not conjecture.
Well,
no, I'm saying it's always the only the 2 instances I could track down an explanation for.
Yeah.
So they've been there for years. I can't verify any of them.
Right. Yeah. Well, that's it. And again, I'm throwing out this is a random idea, but yeah, it's I look at because we're talking about how it only helps the establishment. It helps the police state. It helps the war state. It helps the powers that be who want to assure us that we have their safety in mind and you sacrifice safety for liberty. And the fact that these bricks are out there, I don't know. I mean, it's very interesting. It goes along with, even though the Antifa's, like I said, I think definitely involved in kicking these things up and breaking. I don't know. I wonder. It's just a weird coincidence.
All I have to say to this, to know that this is this is state sanctioned, it doesn't take a genius to tell the difference between a peaceful protester and someone who's stealing from a store.
Right?
The fact that you can't stop those people and let the others go tells me that you're letting this happen for a reason.
Right. And especially when you look at how the police are treating protesters, right? They're ramming people with their cars that are standing there. I don't know if you saw the video of the girl who got like thrown down in the street. It's horrific the way they're acting. And it's everything. The police are really showcasing everything that this riot is fighting against. Hey, what a perfect time for a little commercial break to remind you about our friends at NorthSpokaneCBD.com. They have been supporters of this show for a long time. They have everything you need for CBD needs for you, for your pet, for your loved ones. And the good news is, guys, that you can get 15% off with the promo code LIONS. Yes, promo code LIONS, NorthSpokaneCBD.com. Hey, if you're going to be home, stuck here, waiting for the rioting to stop, you might as well feel okay. NorthSpokaneCBD.com. All right, we're rolling. Sorry, guys, I had to take a quick break because my gardener came, as I knew he would, right in the middle of the podcast. But we're going to record through it, so apologies if there's a little bit of noise in the background. JB's time is precious. He is a doctor of science, after all, and now a doctor of racial philosophy as well, as are we all in the current day and age. That's fine. I'll put a commercial break in there. So anyway, we left off at Antifa and piles of bricks in the streets, right?
Yeah, that's where we were.
Okay, so you were looking into the question of, so Trump declared Antifa a terrorist organization, or on Twitter. He Twitter declared, right? So we were trying to figure out if it's a thing he could actually do or not.
I still haven't found this out. I don't know what you know. I don't know if there's no like real legal definition, as far as I know, of what a terrorist organization is. What, at least from the executive, like, what does that mean? Like,
well, that's the thing. Well, again, tying it into state power, right? There is no, like, the definition was made a more amorphous. And again, to show the expansion of state power under a black president versus a white president, Barack Obama was really leading the way as far as making this amorphous definition of terrorism and expanding it to include domestics, right? Because he said you're something like a domestic actor or an enemy combatant, right? So that's what Barack Obama had said. If you're an enemy combatant, you could be killed home or abroad, doesn't matter. I thought under the official declaration of terrorism, it would be, as far as an organization, not a person, it has to be foreign. Now, how hard that is to change, I'm sure it's very easy, especially with what's going on right now. Maybe he'll get pushback from the House, but I just don't know if legally, if he has the authority to do it, or if he needs it, because I think he's already drawn upon the Insurrection Act, right? That was last used in the Rodney King riots, like we talked about.
Yeah, so it seems like as far as the books are concerned, it's really only foreign entities that you can legally declare terrorism. There's no domestic terrorism law.
So here's the workaround for that. You go, okay, George Soros gave money to Antifa. George Soros is a terrorist. Bam, Antifa's terrorism.
But isn't George Soros an American citizen?
I think isn't he? No, I thought he was I
know he's like Greek.
Fuck, was he?
Am I making that up?
No, he's definitely not an American. Well, he might be an American citizen. He got citizenship, but he's not from America. He's not from the United States.
No, I know he's not from America, but I thought he was an American citizen.
And I thought he still lived abroad. I didn't think he lived here. It doesn't matter. This is very off topic either way. But yeah, so Antifa, do you think that Antifa should be designated a terrorist organization? Let me ask you that.
Antifa's not really an organization. I think that's the first problem.
They're terrorist cells.
Yeah, like at best, you might be able to call them that. It's almost like a QAnon thing. It's just a banner that whoever wants to decide to pick up on the internet can.
Yeah.
So that's kind of this, sure. And to allow the government to declare something that nebulous as a terrorist organization is pretty much giving them license to crackheads on whoever they want.
Yeah, exactly. It's like the classic slippery slope. Yeah, like
exactly.
The Lions of Liberty could easily be declared a terrorist organization for inspiring.
It's actually worse than that, because we actually have detailed like clear members of who the Lions of Liberty are. We are far more of an organization than fucking Antifa is.
The entire Lions of Liberty Pride is going to get raided tonight.
Yeah, we're an actual organization.
They're going to get Duncan Lemp. Watch out, you Duncan Lemps out there. Not to make light of Duncan Lemp, of course. Horrible story of police murdering a man in cold blood. But yeah, no, it's an excellent point. And that's why, even though I hate Antifa with every fiber of my being, I hate Antifa. I agree. You cannot make them. You cannot officially label them a terrorist organization. But and think about, like, to your point, the expansion of government power to be able to track down these people online, right now, because they're associated with a quote unquote terrorist group. It's just going to open up all the NSA spying restrictions.
Yeah, this is just license just to do whatever they want.
Yeah, goodbye to those.
This is what this is. Yeah, because we don't know who Antifa is, so we have to spy on everyone.
Yeah, exactly. It's like,
because Antifa is not a real organization; it can be any of us.
And here's the beauty. And here's the beauty, JB, is like, the FBI used in the NSA spying. They use like the hop system, where it was like, if you made a phone call to a guy, they could do 2 hops from there and like look and spy on everybody in those circles. Right? Think about the internet with how many people follow on Twitter and interact with randomly. You can now literally follow the world. Like the world with 2 hops from people following. Like one guy with 7 million followers, you respond to him. Now the NSA can spy on anybody.
Yeah, that's just a power grab. I'm not impressed, to say the least.
Agreed completely. Let's move on. I want to talk about. So I talked about the. Well, actually, I'm getting a little ahead of myself. Let's talk about the concept of where do you fall on. It's a few bad apples, right? And we talked about police departments, and I think we'll both agree, point blank, you can't ever say these whole people, like all of these people in this group or all these people that do this one job are bad people. We're not saying that. We can agree on that. But do you agree with this argument that the police that are doing this are a few bad apples, or is this something where it is systematic? And a caveat, I roll my eyes when I see people talk about systematic racism. But at the same level, I acknowledge that on some level, it without a doubt exists. But like I said earlier, it's the impact that would have. And I don't agree with the impact that some people give it credit for, while acknowledging for sure it's a thing. For sure it happens. I believe it happens on a much lower level. But is it a few bad apples versus systematic?
Well, it depends on what you're talking about. There's a few bad apples. Those few bad apples are bad because of the system. There is systemic racism. Just what people call systemic racism that you might bristle against is just the fact that racism is just an inherent nature of being, and the people in power generally are not black. So. And
of course they're incentivized, as are all people in power, to maintain their power.
And it's no secret. And I love when people say, like, one of my favorite things is like slavery ended 100-something years ago, like disregarding all the ridiculousness that's happened since slavery's ended, and like the Jim Crow laws and stuff like that. It's like it benefits the people who want to control you to have a permanent underclass. The greatest example I can give with that is the way that Jews were treated in Europe for like the 1,000 years up until World War II. If you stretch from 1945 until like 1045, every time something bad happens, it's a Jew's fault. It's always great. It's always great for the powers that be to have a permanent underclass. And that's what black people in the United States are.
Well, and I'd say, I mean, do you think that black people are still that permanent underclass in the United States right now? Or do you think that that's transitioned?
That's only if you think you think Latinos are? No, I don't think so.
I've never thought about this in my life. I'm literally, just because we're talking about that permanent underclass, I'm wondering if that is transitioned or not. And also, I mean, from my perspective, and you know this perspective too, I feel that black people, I would agree with you that black people are still considered the underclass in America, or designed to be, because of actions taken by government. I feel that government's put a lot of black people in a box, which it is insanely hard to escape.
And I'm just going to jump in just to finish my thought. Please. And that status as the underclass strongly, overwhelmingly influences our interaction with the police.
Yeah. No, exactly.
It clouds everything. That's where the systemic in the racism comes. That's where the system comes. Well, that's the system there. Right? That's the system and systemic.
Of quote, bad apples, right? There's the double-edged sword, is that if it's black people, a few black people do something up and the police go, well, Jesus, we got to profile everybody. We are overreacting. And now everybody that's black, we pull out the gun immediately. That because of those quote unquote few bad apples, right? But those are blown into and exaggerated into this entire race of people. And on the other side, the quote unquote few bad apples of the police department, oh, well, that's just 0.001%, right? It's like, it's an incredible double standard.
Of course it is. And there's not much you can do about it, because I'm not suggesting I have no solutions to change culture. But what we can do, and what we're talking about with the few bad apples, is just raise the bar for becoming a police officer. I seriously think as a culture, as a society, we underestimate how important and serious the role of police officer, the type of power we give these individuals are. The bar to become one is just too fucking low.
Oh yeah,
like they have the power of life over death over the citizenry. And
and it's a lot of people's fallback. They're like, well, I can always, it's like fucking Mahoney in Police Academy movies. I mean, it's not far from the truth.
We need to take this job more seriously for the power we bestow on these individuals. Yeah. The bar needs to be raised.
Well, and you know, to that point, it needs to be raised not only externally, not only from the point of who becomes a cop, but also from the point of internally. Cops protect other cops, right? Like, that's just a thing that happens. It's been well documented. And I saw a great tweet, and I apologize if the guys listening to it that said this. It was somebody with many more followers on Twitter than me. But he goes, look, look, if you have 10 bad cops and you have 1,000 good cops who do nothing about those 10 bad cops, you have 1,010 bad cops. And I could not agree with that statement more.
Yeah.
I mean,
you're the police after all.
Yeah.
Who's going to police? Like, you're supposed to police. Yeah, yes. You need to police the police. You're the only ones here to do it. Like,
give me a fucking Serpico up in here, man. Like, Jesus Christ.
That's why the bad apples is your job is too important. I think Chris Rock, I saw something floating around Facebook comparing bad apples. Imagine like United came out and said like 10% of their pilots were drunk assholes who didn't know how to land. Like, would you fly with that company? Like, you can't have a small percent. Certain jobs are too important to have bad apples in.
Yeah, that's a great analogy. I mean, honestly, because exactly. And those pilots, like 10% of those pilots, maybe they can still kind of land. But yeah, you're talking life or death. You're talking people, and not only life and death, but you're talking generational impact of police decisions. You're talking putting people in prison from over policing, ruining entire families, ruining entire futures. Like, I've said this on the show many times, the number one indicator in upward social mobility is an intact family unit. That and it's not close. You can give somebody as much money as you 100%. Want. It's the intact family unit. And policing breaks families up. Period. The drug war breaks families up. Over policing neighborhoods breaks up. Bull 3 strike rules, which Joe Biden, of course, is complying and breaks families up. It's just
had to sneak that dig in there.
I did because Joe Biden, man. I mean, Trump too. Fuck them both. But it just aggravates me that they're like, oh, Joe Biden would never. He's on the side of the black community. It's like, no, he was very agreeable to putting all of you in jail. But let's see. I want to move on to one more thing. So we talked about, and I sent you this story too. I love seeing people protecting stores. I like seeing black Americans protecting stores, holding guns, and saying, look, do what you're going to do. Protest, we're with you, but you're not going to come in here and rob this store. And I also think that I saw the guy, and it might have been the story I sent you, but a prominent figure, and I can't remember his name because of the scotch, but he has a nickname he calls himself, and I can't remember if it's in Philly or maybe Boston, but he's a guy leading a group of well-armed black men, and their goal is to be armed and to diffuse situations with the police. And you know how that happens is by being well-armed. If you're a group of people with fucking AR-15s, you are not going to be intimidated by cops. And they don't want to jump that interaction up to the next level, because then everybody dies. And that's the thing with the monopoly of violence is like people, the irony is like all these people marching right now, right? all these allies, quote unquote allies of the black community, are out there marching are the same people that want to take away gun rights and make it impossible to get a gun, which is the one thing that is really going to even the goddamn playing field and put the police state in check.
I agree, but I've heard. Do you know we should bring up at least a liberal argument to that?
Okay, go
ahead. The liberal argument to that, because this is in news, is talking that like the policing in this country is so aggressive, particularly in the black community, because of the propensity of guns. If we could magically make all the guns disappear, which it's not possible, then that would automatically reduce the, I guess, the warlike nature of policing in this country. If they're not so, if they don't anticipate that any person they pull over or encounter has a firearm.
See, number one, and I know you already know these arguments. Number one,
I'm playing devil's advocate here.
I know, I know,
because I
know you are.
Because these things, like I think about it from the perspective of someone's listening to this show and thinking about these ideas. We should talk about the other side. So they can.
I agree.
So
and I think we've done a good job. I'm going out of my way because I want to share this show. I want people to listen to it because I think it's giving very insightful perspectives, and I love having you on because you're a very, very intellectual guy with very deep thought out arguments, and that's what I love talking to you about this stuff. It's not just surface, but at the same time, right? We already know that people that have guns that have a propensity for guns, people that are already forced into the criminal system because of over policing, because of the drug war, because of all these other circumstances, they're going to get a gun no matter what. And the people that get killed that have guns in the black community that are probably the ones that are being over-policed or that are fighting with the cops predominantly in bad neighborhoods are probably not people that legally purchase those firearms anyway. The thing is, the cops know that. And if the cops knew that people had ability to buy legal guns all the time, then you're not just finding people that are, already been in jail, that are on street corners, that are involved in illicit activities because they have to, because they're forced into it by the state. Now, everybody has them. They're all legal. So instead of going up expecting to be shot because the person's a criminal with an illegal weapon, now you go up and you go, this guy, probably armed to protect himself, probably armed legally, and I should presume every one of these people is armed legally. Thus, I'm not going to overreact and expect to be shot. Whereas I feel now, they're automatically presuming criminal illegal firearm.
Oh, I like that. Strong.
Sometimes drinking all this whiskey and podcasting gives you a clarity of thought. And man, so we could keep going longer, but the one thing I wanted to hit on too, and then I want to hear just in general, kind of, if you have anything else to add to this, I want to hear, feel free to rant and rant at me and whatever you want to say for a conversation. But Nickelodeon, this really pissed me off today. Not only Nickelodeon, but I'm seeing all these corporations, right? Corporations, individuals, social media campaigns, all that kind of shit, right? They're all posting and all sending out these messages. And I got a message from Peloton that was like, we support George Floyd and we support racial equality, right? And even though I agree with them, I responded to them on the email and I told them to fuck off and not to email me this shit. Because even if I agree with you, I don't need Peloton preaching to me about racial equality. It's not your place. So today I see that Nickelodeon, right? Last night, all the Viacom stations ran I guess some little thing like Nickelodeon ran a thing that said, here's our children's Bill of Rights or something like that. Then they played 8 minutes plus of heavy breathing. And it kind of sounded like, it's just like, right, 8 minutes with a flashing text over and over that said, I can't breathe for 8.5 minutes. Now, there was no warning about this going in. It just happened. And you saw a lot of people on social media that said, oh my God, Nickelodeon, you were so meaningful. Thank you. I'm pissed. And the reason I'm pissed is not because I don't think a network should be able to do that. I would be fine with any network other than Nickelodeon or Disney doing it. But my problem, and this is where I want to hear your take on it, is when you have very material that could be legitimately traumatizing, right? And people will say this is good because children have to hear about it and parents have to talk to their children about it. But these people don't know how old the kids are. It's been proven that trauma, including traumatic events, this type of thing, incidents of just any sort of real trauma on developing brains can really damage a kid and cause long-lasting problems. Do you think that they are entitled and right and that it's justifiable to run something like this because corporate responsibility or because the network believes in it and take that out of the hands of the parents?
Well, that's loaded.
So am I, right? So am I by now.
I have to start off by saying this disclaimer. I don't have children. I don't know what it's like to be a parent and have to raise a kid and mold a child in my image of whatever you breeders do, just to use that term. I've never used that term before. I think this is the first time in my life. I like it. Nevertheless, if I don't know, I can't speak to the trauma of the commercial. I'm looking at this right now. But I don't think it's helpful. Let me go from two ways. One from the corporate perspective and one from the child's perspective. And let's feel what was the disclaimer. So I'm only speaking for myself, of course. Yeah. From a corporate perspective, you've known me for a long time. I'm a pretty cynical person. That's
what I love about you.
Yeah, I'll be hard pressed to see any corporation making any type of statement or show of support or solidarity that isn't motivated and groomed by a team of PR and mulled over in some corporate boardroom. Everything that a corporation does that has to do with these types of things always rings hollow to me, full stop. Regardless of who's doing it.
Right. It's crazy, right? That people accept this. So, and the Babylon Bee, sorry to interrupt you. I'll let you go again. The Babylon Bee had a great kind of joke on this where they're like, Denny's announces its new anti-fascism omelet. And it had all these white people lined up to get it. And it's it's hard to, these people just accept it so beautiful. Meanwhile, the rest of us are making jerk off motions.
Yeah. For me, for a corporation doing this, sometimes there's a hit, sometimes there's a miss, but it's always calculated.
Yeah.
And I don't like that. And I don't need to see it. They're, like you say, they're well within their rights to do it. And there's a lot of people in society that expect it from them who make up their consumer base. So I can understand from a business standpoint why they might want to do these types of things. That makes sense to me, but they don't resonate with me.
Well, the problem I have with this specifically, though, is so we, as libertarians, we're you could do what you want, private company. You look at the non-aggression principle, though, and, kind of do no harm. And I look at this, and again, I can't say definitively, and this I was arguing with people on Twitter before I quit social media for the day. I can't say definitively that this damaged somebody. I don't know. And my kid's not old enough. She wasn't watching Nickelodeon at the time. I can't say if it would have damaged her or not. But that's the problem, is nobody can. And I have people coming back and arguing with me and saying, well, look, this is important because you're forced to talk to your kids about it. And this happens to children. Black children grow up afraid. And
that was my second. That was my second point.
Go ahead.
Yeah, that was my second point. And that was first from the corporation aspect. From the child aspect, I don't know who these people are in terms of children and how old they are. A child, probably 10, 11, up until 12, maybe. I don't think this will do much good. Racism in this country isn't about burning crosses on Granny's lawn anymore. It's a much more nuanced conversation that I don't think an 8-year-old can have. After watching this art piece that they put on a Nickelodeon, I don't think they're ready. And as a black person in this country, I started understanding what it meant to be black in this country, probably around middle school, 13, about going into high school, 12, 13. That's when I really started understanding history, reading history, actually watching the news and understanding the news. I started getting a full understanding of what it means to be black in this country. And as you just mentioned it damaged me. I'll say that. It damaged me. It caused me anxiety. It caused me anger growing up as a kid. I think I said this in one podcast a long, long time ago. Growing black in this country is almost like a mental illness. The minute you realize what it means to be black in this country, and it's young. I'm talking about middle school. I'm saying this. You're not a grown-up. I'm talking about 12, 13. It affects you.
Yeah.
It starts right then. So, maybe for a person of that age, a white person that age, that might be in an area not like Long Island that's pretty ethnically diverse, doesn't even know any black people. We are a minority. There's vast swaths of this country where there are no black people.
Yeah. There's places where college athletics are the only black people these people will see in their lifetime.
So I'm saying for a certain demographic, like what I had to deal with it when I was 12, and it didn't kill me. It changed my perspective, but I also have to live with it for the rest of my life. Teaching people who never have to interact with anyone who doesn't look like them that this is going on at an early age, I think probably give them a pretty good head start. And I think you can handle it at 12. Any less, I don't think you'll understand it at all. That's why I'm a little skeptical on damage. I think this is too nuanced and complicated. There's a point where you don't even understand what's going on, to the point where it's probably time when you should be processing this.
Right. Well, that's kind of where I'm coming from is, people are, the argument people are making is that children need to know about this. It's happening. And, to your point, and like I said, I'm fine with it. Network TV, any other thing, just not children's television where you don't know the age of the people. And like, I could send you this link I found, because in the work I do with this foster care nonprofit, there's a lot of damage that happens between 0 and 5. And it's because that's like the height of brain development, where really there's a lot going on and a lot can go very wrong with it. And a lot of these kids in the foster care out in Los Angeles are, they're minorities, number one, and they're coming from very dysfunctional households. So these people have experienced trauma already. But the problem is, when you have something, and granted, their trauma is worse than seeing something on TV. But the thing that people don't realize, and we can't necessarily quantify, is when you see something like that, right? When you're not prepared for it, and this is my problem with, the libertarian perspective of like, they can do whatever they want as a private network, is that when you don't have a forewarning, right? It's not on the schedule to say racially charged, intentionally terrifying message, because it was intended to be intimidating. It's like I said, heavy breathing.
It's intended to. It's
intended to scare and
it's
provoke.
Elicit a response. It's visceral. It's not like
it's not a casual thing like, hey, be nice. And for me, that can cause. But we don't know. I don't know. But I'd rather have parents be able to say, look, I don't want my young child that's a developing brain to have trauma from seeing this. Like, I can remember shit from when I was really young that still sticks in my brain to this day. To this day. Do you remember a movie called The Last Unicorn, JB? Did you ever see that movie? Animated film?
No, I don't think so.
Okay.
The title sounds vaguely familiar.
It was not as frou-frou as one would imagine. It wasn't like a My Little Pony. It was like a really weird kind of swords and sorcery animated movie. And I saw it when I was really little. And I remember to this day, because I had nightmares about it for years. There was a skull on top of a clock in this movie, and that skull haunted my dreams for 5-10 years. I still remember to this day. It's really embedded in me. So I can't say, and nobody could say, what affects you, what ingrains. Like, I mean, children literally could be traumatized by this heavy breathing. They don't know what these kids have gone through. Like, our buddy Ben, who's Liberty Hippie from the Homesteads and Homeschools podcast, he made a point, like, he has foster children that he adopted. He goes, yeah, well, one of my foster kids saw his mother get choked. This is what this kid's hearing. It's just something you can't justify the potential trauma to say that, well, people should hear about it. And what I told people is like, how is this different from then playing audio of a theatrical rape, a reproduced rape for somebody, and saying, please stop over the screen, over the sounds of a rape?
It's no different at all.
It's the exact same.
Yeah, it's the exact same thing.
It's the exact same thing.
Like,
but again, if you say that to people, they go, oh, God, no. But it's the same thing. It's the same justification. It's the same logic.
Yeah, I agree. Like I said, I can't speak to the trauma. I just, like, if anything, like, even if, like, I can't speak to that, the very fact I don't think that it'll be effective for those children who could potentially be traumatized by it. They're already too young to even understand the nuances of this conversation to get-go. It's not worth it. So I think it was a mistake.
So you're saying that our 0 to 5 podcast listeners are a joke, JB? Because that's at least 75% of our audience.
Yeah, they don't have enough gray matter to.
We're like CNN. We're like CNN. You know how CNN plays at airports? We have a deal where we play in every preschool.
You keep them docile.
Okay, our last question to wrap up what has been a very enjoyable podcast as always. Charged question. Interesting question, though. And of course, this is just you and not every person out there. When you see people posting black squares on Instagram, when you see long diatribes written by ostensibly white people that are very privileged, that you arguably could have not dealt with much diversity in their lives, writing scribes saying that they support people of color and or sharing their interactions. I remember one cringeworthy one from a comedian friend that said, and again, I don't necessarily believe this, said she was walking down the street and a homeless man was walking down the street, a black homeless man, and she said she'd always tried to smile at him. And this one day he turned to her with tears in his eyes and he said, "Why do you hate us?" And she said, "Ignorance and intolerance." I'm not saying it didn't happen. I'm saying it sounds like, okay. I'm sorry, is this the screenplay you're writing? But anyway, sorry, getting back to the point. JB, how do you feel about that? Is it something that you take it, you say, thank you for supporting me and Black America, or do you roll your eyes, or are you somewhere in between?
Like, I feel like in everything in the face of the earth, maybe it's my Buddhist background. I'm always looking for the middle path, you know.
Yeah. I knew you'd cop out.
Yeah, it's always everything. This whole world is a shade of gray. That's how I see it. People who deal with absolutes, you're already starting off the wrong foot if you're dealing with absolutes. I say this all the time. Like, I very rarely ever deal in absolutes. The world is a shade of gray. That's how I see it.
Well, let's get a little bit more nuanced then. Let me ask you this. So how many times have you seen, let's say when these things happen, of the interactions you have online, of the things you see happen, like we're talking about corporate America, we're talking about social movements, we're talking about online social media movements, of what you see, how much of it do you say, okay, you know what, good, I respect that, I appreciate that, and how much of it makes you roll your eyes and go, you're jumping on to virtue signal and this is just a bunch of horse shit. It's not really. And I know when it comes down to brass tacks, you're not going to be there to help, and this is all just making you feel better to get likes.
We are. You just said this is just me, right? Harkening back to the fact
this is just you. Yeah.
Harkening back to the fact that I am a cynic at heart. I do think there's a substantial amount of people who take this as an opportunity to, I guess, quote unquote, virtue signal, but if I want to take it from an objective viewpoint, even if their motives aren't pure, I don't like contributing to the conversation, at least in volume, is beneficial. I think at virtual signaling at this point is better than silence. And I'm silent. It's not like you're Twitter and Facebook friends with me. I'm not going on long screeds.
No, you never write anything.
Yeah, I don't write anything. Yeah, I'm like I might as well not have these things. And actually, I only go on Facebook
you're like an incel.
The forum, really. Sometimes
why even have a dick?
So it's like, I think that like my worldview, independent of me being a black person and being a complete cynic, I tend to look negatively on some.
By the way, you just said you were a white person there.
Cynic, I said.
No, Did I say white? You said I'm a white person and a cynic.
No, I said apart. Oh, maybe I misspoke. Apart from being a black person,
that's our clip. That's my promo clip for the show.
As a cynic, my visceral reaction is that this person is showboating, but I think that has something to do with me. I don't know for a fact. There's always this uncertainty. This person might be sincere. They might not be. But either way, they're contributing to a narrative about something that I support when I'm not really willing to do so. So I feel hard-pressed to judge.
Yeah. I mean, I'm with you there. I am also a huge cynic. And I feel that my problem with all of this is that so much of it is fluff. So much of it is virtue signaling that of like I said with the riots and the looters and the rebound, right? The mental rebound of people that would ostensibly be for the cause and then go, oh, this. I worry that, like me, my instant reaction, and shame on me, honestly, it's because I'm too cynical and I'm too jaded at this point, just from maybe doing this so long. But when I see these type of things on social media, my immediate initial reaction is not, cool, okay. My initial reaction is, get the fuck out of here. Like,
I'll add to that.
How many of me are out there that would usually be on the cause and now have been so annoyed by social bullshit and virtue signaling that you're like, yeah, fuck off for everything.
That's the thing. I'll add to that. It doesn't annoy me because I'm not as angry as the illustrious Brian McWilliams. Not much.
That's why you don't have your own show. Yeah. That's why you don't have your own show.
I'm not a very angry person, so it doesn't annoy me, but it doesn't do anything for me. I'll toss my wife in there. You know, on Instagram, everyone's changing like their profile to black or something like that. She asked me if I wanted to do it. I was like, no. Like, I don't do things like that. Full stop. It's like I don't need to prove that I think Black Lives Matter. I'm black, first of all. And second of all, it's like when I see this, it doesn't do anything for me because it doesn't do anything.
Yes.
It doesn't change anything.
Yes.
It doesn't change. It doesn't do anything. It's like, it's just all it does is make you feel better about yourself for like 2 minutes. Yeah. And then you can move on. You're like, okay, I've done something, but that's a nothing to me. It's like it doesn't resonate with the powers that be. It doesn't resonate with the police state. It doesn't resonate with the commissioner of Philadelphia. They don't know whether you did it or you didn't. It doesn't do anything.
Yeah, that's more or less you perfectly encapsulated my feeling too. Is that I think that people that do this stuff are trying to prove something to themselves, you know. And it's like maybe in fact the people that we should look at and be like, okay, here's the racist. We need to start a cause, which is like, if you support.
Well, I wouldn't go that far.
Well, I know, but hey, come on, let me run with this because it's kind of funny. But it's like, you know, we'll start a cause, but like, if you don't hate black people in any way, you change your profile picture to I don't know, Kareem Abdul-Jabbar, and then we know who the real racists are because those are the people that question whether or not they have something to prove.
If anything, it should be Kareem because everyone who sees it will be like, oh, Kareem. And then they'll remember how much they like black people. That's all you need. It's like, that's actually that's even a better plan, you know?
Dude, I tell you what, man, Black America would be so much better off if The Rock was just black.
We're fine.
All right. Anyway, this, JB, this has been awesome, man. I want to give you closing. Whoops, I just banged my own desk. You're banging your desk. I'm banging my desk. We're both pretty drunk right now. I want to give you closing remarks. And I do want to say that I need to have you on ELL more often, but I don't have anybody on this show, obviously.
No, it's a solo show.
It's a ranting show, and my ratings go down when I have guests. But yeah, man, I want to give you last haps here, and cheers as always to an incredibly enjoyable conversation, man. I love talking to you about anything because, as I said, you never come at anything from a shoot from the hip perspective, and you always have you put a lot of thought into it, and it's very, I don't know, that's the old neurons firing, man. So cheers to you, buddy.
Flattery will get you everything. Thank you. I'll keep it really simple and short. It's don't get distracted. If there's anything, maybe we should just clip it and put it in the front. Don't get distracted. Don't let the state confuse you about what people are complaining about. Don't let the violence, this inherent violence, this has been going on since the Roman Republic. Like, riots is the time for the state and individuals to take advantage. Don't let that distract you from what set the keg off in the first place. Stay focused. There's a problem with policing in this country. There's a problem with the police state, and by extension, the government's control over its citizenry. Stay focused. If you think the rioters are the be-all, end-all of this movement, you need to shift gears here. And I'll just leave it at that.
Beautiful. JB, thank you, my friend. Guys, from me, Brian McWilliams, from Dr. Science, JB Lubin, from the Lions of Liberty, and from Electric Libertyland, always stay plugged into Liberty.